Hello and welcome back to the race review, or that's what I would be saying if this was a race review. But, you see, I've had this theory for a long time and I didn't want to comment on it because I didn't want to ruin the hype of the 2021 season, but now I think it's time to share my theory. You see, our favorite seasons in F1 are when the racing is close, when the cars are really close together, wheel-to-wheel battles, that sort of thing. And even when they're not close, you have races from these boring seasons that are incredible because of the close wheel-to-wheel action. But ask yourself, in those races, was there a fastest car? And was that fastest car attempting to lead the race? And you come to the conclusion that it's always the fastest car is trying to make his way through the field, or there's a race between two cars that are supposedly both the fastest car. But you see, for 2021, I don't think it's going to work like that for a couple of reasons. The first one is dirty air, and this is the problem of F1. You know, we've known this for a long time. The dirty air problem is huge. The fact is the cars can't follow each other at all, and although it should be fixed in 2021, or 2022 I should say, we don't know, and the fact is those regulations is the risk that somebody's going to come out in front and have such a good interpretation of the regulations. I mean, they could be regaining like half the downforce. We don't know what Red Bull's doing right now. They could be coming up with rocket-powered cars for all we know. They could be way ahead of everybody. We just don't know. Yet I'm pretty confident that Mercedes will not be out on top in these new regulations. So if that makes any of you happy, then great. But I don't think this season is going to bring the good racing that people thought it was. And that's for a couple of reasons. You see, the winners of these races have always been the ones on pole position or second place. So I don't think we're going to get a Sergio Perez situation where, last year Perez came back through the field and won the race. I don't think we're going to see that for a long time again or at least not through this year, because the front runners are so far ahead of everybody else. Your Aston Martins, Alpines, everybody. I mean, they're not just going to be racing each other, and they're not going to be, obviously there was luck in the Perez race, but, we're not going to see that sort of luck unless there's something really goes wrong for the front runners, which I just can't imagine happening. So remember, we're not going to see one of those. Then there's also going to be the fact that with two equal cars in a dirty air era, which we're in now, which none of us can deny, the racing between these cars is going to be quite bad, and eventually these gaps will form, like there was between Verstappen and Hamilton. By the end of the race, there was still almost a 5-second gap. Even though 10 laps before the end of the race, there was still a 5-second gap. And because of the dirty air, nobody could catch each other. Hamilton wasn't going any faster, and Verstappen wasn't closing in on him because of the dirty air. So even if Verstappen was faster in the moment, because of that, it equalized their car performance. And I'm not saying that the Red Bull is leagues faster than the Mercedes anymore, but it's clearly they're about equal. But that's what's so dangerous about the situation. Because the cars are almost equal, we're not going to see the good racing that people expect because of the dirty air. So if you remove one or two of these factors, you're still going to have some good racing. If you remove the fact that the cars are equal and suddenly the cars are not equal, the Red Bulls or the Mercedes is faster, but, that car has bad luck. And I'm going to get to a season where that happened. Just you wait. Or we remove the dirty air problem, which we can't do this year, then you have good racing. But until we do that, you can't do that. You can't have the good racing that you expect. And that was just sort of how it is today. As I watched the race, I realized that there will never be a competitive two-car team at Mercedes ever again. They will never run two cars, each one of them trying to win the race. Never. Reason why? Because the second driver at Mercedes will always be treated less fairly than the main driver, which will be Hamilton until it is George Russell. Bottas will never get given the chance to win a championship, hence what happened today. He will always be given a car that is lesser than Lewis Hamilton's in certain ways, and even if they say it's equal, there will always be something internally that is not favoring Bottas, and Bottas will always know that. But beyond Mercedes, Red Bull seems to be having the second driver curse again, because although Perez led the race for a little while, he ended up getting put on this odd strategy that was like medium for 50 laps, then the softs. Like, it made no sense to me, and I know he's like the tire manager wizard, but like, what? Who puts their driver on a 50 lap stint on the mediums? Come on, these are Pirelli tires. We know what happens when they go off. Anyways, that's the rant of that over. But I want to talk about 3 seasons really, from recent memory, from the time that I was alive. So I'm not going to be saying, like 2000s, early 2000s, bring back the V10s era, because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about seasons in the V8 era. Here we go. In 2007 and 2008, McLaren had undoubtedly the faster car, and yet Ferrari won the Constructors' Championship twice. Why is this, you ask? Well, in 2007, Hamilton was but a young boy, and in 2008, they decided to hire Heikki Kovalainen, and Kovalainen is not a front-running driver. Just let's be clear about that. So Ferrari scooped up both Constructors' Championships, and within that, there was some excellent racing. You had, the Brazilian Grand Prix of 2007, you had the Australian Grand Prix in 2007, you had all sorts of great races in 2007 and 2008, there was great races. I can't think of a time in those seasons where we were ever starved for a good race, in those seasons. And then there was the clean air era. And for those who don't know what that means, that is 2010 to 2013, or 2009 to 2013, if you believe that was part of that era as well. The clean air era was a time of high rear wings and low wide front wings. And that is interesting because of something that is called dirty air, and you all know what that is, but many of you don't know there was the clean air era, and that was a time where the F1 rule makers decided to design cars that looked good, but they still had a lot of clean air, not dirty air. So after 2008, all of those mini wings were stripped off, the diffusers were made smaller, and the cars were going to be a lot slower, or so they thought. And then you had 2010, when all the teams realized that there was so much potential within these cars, and that they could be the fastest cars ever if only they were allowed to run V10 engines, which obviously they weren't. Nonetheless, though, these were the fastest ever a V8 F1 car would ever go because of the combination of slicks, high rear wings, and low front wings, plus double diffusers, blown exhausts. The incredible technology from that era is what shapes what cars I design when I design F1 cars. Most of my cars have similar things to that. I take a lot of inspiration from the Red Bull RB6 because it is the greatest F1 car of all time. And within that era, there was one season in particular that had a lot of incredible racing. And you all know what it is. That's right, it is the 2012 season. And in 2012, you had Sebastian Vettel facing off against Fernando Alonso, facing off against Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button. Felipe Massa really didn't do anything. Mark Webber was in there for a little while. It was so many drivers that could win the championship at so many times. It was, without doubt, the greatest season in living memory, and I cannot think of a better season within my entire lifetime. Until the 2022 regulation changes, we may not see a better season with better racing. I can't imagine a time when I will see that before then. If I'm completely honest, I'm not even sure that the 2022 regulations will create even racing, because what happens, as I said earlier, if a team just pulls out far in front and nobody can compete with them because they've all spent up to the budget cap? That's the danger of this budget cap. The fact that if some team gets so far ahead that the other teams need to wait an entire year to come back, that is going to be the nail in the coffin. If that happens to the budget with the budget cap era, we are screwed, and we need to remove the budget cap, or we need to make it semi-optional. So we'll see about that. Anyways, 2012 season, I know you all want to know the stories about that. We had incredible races like Silverstone with Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso. We had Valencia with Fernando Alonso fighting all the way back through the field to win the race after Sebastian Vettel had an alternator failure. We had Bahrain, where Vettel won his first race and Kimi was trying to win the race. That was incredible racing from both of them. Anyways, there was just so many great races that season. I can't name them all. But there was the one factor that made it all great. It was the fact that the Red Bulls were fighting back from a bad start in the season to win the championship. And although they did win in the end, they won because they had the fastest car. But they had so much bad luck in the early parts of the season that they were always fighting back, always wheel-to-wheel battling. And sure, it was because, there was not as much dirty air at the time that they could do that. But nonetheless, when it came to, the Asia stretch, per se, obviously Sebastian Vettel got his championship lead back then, but that was only because he was the king of the Asia stretch of that season. Now we don't even have an Asia stretch in F1. I think we need to be talking up to ourselves and saying, have we gone down the right path with these regulations, and do we genuinely think there'll be a championship fight? I want to be proven wrong on this, okay? I want next race to be incredible, and I will watch the entire race weekend. I will do everything. I want this race to be as great as possible. I want the season to be as great as possible, but I fear that we're coming into what may be a boring season in memory, because either Mercedes is going to pull a lead out and Red Bull will implode, or they pull a big lead out and suddenly it's great racing because they'll be fighting back from their okay start of the season, but they want a great start. So it'll be great. But if that happens, and the thing is, right, did we see much wheel-to-wheel battling today between Verstappen and Hamilton? Not as much as we could have. And that's not because the cars aren't equal. It's because of the dirty air. We keep forgetting this. The second Verstappen is behind Hamilton, he can't follow him that closely. That's why the first lap is so important these days. The fact is, if you don't get into the position you want to be on the first lap, I don't think you can win a race these days. And crazy opinion, obviously the F1 video game would like to say otherwise, but I don't think so. Anyways, if you did enjoy this week's video, sort of interesting take this video, consider liking, subscribing. Thank you. Goodbye.